This exercise is going to help you build some end range strength in your wrist, specifically wrist extension, which is important for things like being on your hands and knees or push-ups or handstands or anything you like to do with your wrists in that manner. So for this exercise, we are going to get into your end range of motion. So typically that's going to look like this position here, or we can do it in this position here. You can do both hands at a time or one at a time, depending on what you're doing that day or what your goal is. I'm just gonna show you with my left wrist. Now, the key here is to keep your elbow locked and to keep the heel of your palm on the ground glued. We don't want it coming up, or that is past the range of motion that we are really looking for. So we're gonna keep the elbow locked, keep the heel down of the palm down, and then lean into our passive range of motion where we're trying to find a wrist extension stretch. So that's gonna be this stuff on stretch, or we're just getting to our end range of motion here. So finding that end range. Now, this is where we start the exercise. You're gonna start by lifting or thinking about lifting your fingers in the top of your hand towards your wrist, like this motion, and you're gonna find those muscles and contract them. You're gonna slowly lean out of this position, but you're trying to bring your wrist with you. Now, most people, if you are like me, you have a lot of flexibility and you don't have a lot of strength here. So you're gonna lean really far out before your wrist comes with you. Notice how far it took me or how far I had to lean out before I could bring my knuckles off the ground. That is kind of what I'm looking for. The knuckles or the bottom sides of your finger knuckles here are lifting. So all the way here is where we start. Contract those muscles, lift and lean, hold for the prescribed amount of time, typically between 5 and 10 seconds, maybe only 3 to 5 seconds, but sometimes 10 to 30, depending on what your goal of your training is. But when we are holding, you are trying to maintain that position, and then we reset and come out of it back to the start position. Trying not to bend the elbow. Notice how I did that and I compensated a little bit and I fixed it. So once we get to that starting position again, that would be the end of rep 1. So a passive range liftoff is going into your passive range of motion, contracting those muscles, trying to lift your hand towards your forearm, reaching all the way back and trying to bring it with us, and then holding as soon as we can get those knuckles off the ground. This is trying to learn how to engage and strengthen all of the top of your wrist muscles for wrist extension in your passive range of motion, which is going to be all of this range of motion that you have until you're able to lean back. So you can see how much position change that was for me, which means I have a lot of passive range of motion that I don't have active strength and active control over. This exercise is one exercise to help capture some of that and turn it into usable active range of motion and strength. So over time, you should see that you are able to lean out of it less and less, and that you're able to essentially then own more of your range of motion, which is the goal. So be patient and be consistent with this. It takes a long time, but over time you should see a lot less movement before you can get your knuckles off the ground, and that will mean you're improving in your active strength and active range of motion for wrist extension.